Today, we're diving into something that can truly transform the way you speak English. Thinking in English. Yes, you heard that right. If you've been translating in your head before speaking, this episode is for you.
Absolutely. Thinking in English is a game changer because it helps you speak more naturally and fluently. In this episode, we'll talk about why it's important, the challenges you might face, and some simple, effective tips to start thinking in English right away.
Plus, we've got a fun little activity later in the episode to help you practice. So, grab your notebook, sit back, and let's get started. So, let's jump right in. Julia, let's start with the big question. Why does thinking in English matter so much when it comes to improving your speaking skills?
Great question, Jason. Thinking in English is like building a bridge between your thoughts and your words. When you think in your native language and then translate into English, it slows you down and sometimes the meaning gets lost in translation. But when you think directly in English, your responses are quicker, more natural, and you sound more confident.
Exactly. It's also worth mentioning that thinking in English helps you develop a stronger vocabulary and better sentence structures because you're training your brain to process the language directly. It's almost like immersing yourself in an English-speaking environment even if you're not physically there.
That's a great point. And it's not just about fluency, it's also about accuracy. When you think in English, you're practicing forming sentences correctly in your mind before speaking. Over time, this makes your speech more grammatically accurate, even without realizing it.
Right. I also think that thinking in English builds confidence. For example, imagine you're at a restaurant and you need to order in English. If you're translating in your head, you might hesitate or stumble. But if you've trained yourself to think in English, it feels much easier and more natural.
Exactly. And another benefit is that it reduces mental fatigue. Translation takes a lot of effort, and it can make speaking feel exhausting. But when you think in English, you're cutting out that extra step, which makes communication smoother and less tiring.
That's so true. And here's something interesting. When you start thinking in English, you'll notice that it spills over into your everyday life. You'll begin to notice English words, phrases, and expressions more naturally, whether it's in movies, songs, or conversations.
Yes, it's like your brain gets into English mode, and everything becomes a learning opportunity. And the best part? You don't need to be perfect to start. Even if your sentences are simple or have mistakes, the key is to begin practicing.
Absolutely. Thinking in English is a skill that grows with time and effort. Don't worry if it feels awkward or difficult at first. We'll share some tips later in the episode to make it easier for you. Stick with us. Now that we've talked about why thinking in English is so important, let's address the elephant in the room. The challenges. Julia, why do you think it's so hard for people to start thinking in English?
Well, Jason, one big reason is habit. Most people are used to thinking in their native language because that's what they've done their entire lives. Switching to English can feel unnatural at first, almost like trying to write with your non-dominant hand.
That's a great comparison, Julia. And another challenge I've noticed is vocabulary. If someone doesn't know enough English words, they might feel stuck when trying to form thoughts in English. It can be frustrating when you can't find the words you need.
Absolutely. And let's not forget confidence. Many learners are afraid of making mistakes, even in their own minds. They worry that their sentences might not be grammatically correct, so they avoid thinking in English altogether.
That's so true. Fear of mistakes can hold people back. I think another issue is translation. Many learners are stuck in the habit of translating from their native language to English. It's hard to break out of that cycle because it's how they've been taught to learn a new language.
Exactly, Jason. And speaking of cycles, another challenge is consistency. Even if someone starts thinking in English, they might not stick with it because it feels tiring or awkward at first. It's easy to slip back into old habits when things get tough.
Right. And let's not ignore the environment. If someone is surrounded by their native language all the time and doesn't have much exposure to English, it's even harder to practice thinking in English.
That's a big one, Jason. And I think there's also the challenge of overthinking. Sometimes learners try too hard to make their thoughts perfect in English, and that just adds pressure. It's okay to start with simple sentences and build from there.
Exactly, Julia. The key is to embrace the process and not aim for perfection right away. Overcoming these challenges might take time, but it's absolutely worth the effort. And remember, these are common struggles. You're not alone.
That's such an important message, Jason. And don't worry, listeners. We've got some practical tips coming up next to help you overcome these challenges and start thinking in English more easily. Stay tuned.
Now that we've talked about why thinking in English is so important, let's address the elephant in the room, the challenges. Julia, why do you think it's so hard for people to start thinking in English?
Well, Jason, one big reason is habit. Most people are used to thinking in their native language because that's what they've done their entire lives. Switching to English can feel unnatural at first, almost like trying to write with your non-dominant hand.
That's a great comparison, Julia. And another challenge I've noticed is vocabulary. If someone doesn't know enough English words, they might feel stuck when trying to form thoughts in English. It can be frustrating when you can't find the words you need.
Absolutely. And let's not forget confidence. Many learners are afraid of making mistakes, even in their own minds. They worry that their sentences might not be grammatically correct, so they avoid thinking in English altogether.
That's so true. Fear of mistakes can hold people back. I think another issue is translation. Many learners are stuck in the habit of translating from their native language to English. It's hard to break out of that cycle because it's how they've been taught to learn a new language.
Exactly, Jason. And speaking of cycles, another challenge is consistency. Even if someone starts thinking in English, they might not stick with it because it feels tiring or awkward at first. It's easy to slip back into old habits when things get tough.
Right? And let's not ignore the environment. If someone is surrounded by their native language all the time and doesn't have much exposure to English, it's even harder to practice thinking in English.
That's a big one, Jason. And I think there's also the challenge of overthinking. Sometimes learners try too hard to make their thoughts perfect in English, and that just adds pressure. It's okay to start with simple sentences and build from there.
Exactly, Julia. The key is to embrace the process and not aim for perfection right away. Overcoming these challenges might take time, but it's absolutely worth the effort. And remember, these are common struggles. You're not alone.
That's such an important message, Jason. And don't worry, listeners. We've got some practical tips coming up next to help you overcome these challenges and start thinking in English more easily. Stay tuned.
All right, it's time for the exciting part, how to actually start thinking in English. Julia, let's dive into some practical tips that our listeners can use right away.
Absolutely, Jason. Let's start with a simple one, labeling. Look around you and start labeling objects in English. For example, if you see a chair, think, "This is a chair." If you see a book, think, "This is a book." It's an easy way to get your brain used to associating objects with English words.
That's a great tip, Julia. And to take it a step further, Try describing those objects. For instance, instead of just thinking, "This is a chair," you could say, "This is a brown wooden chair. It looks comfortable." Adding more detail helps you practice forming longer sentences in your mind.
Yes. Another effective method is self-talk. Talk to yourself in English about what you're doing or planning. For example, if you're cooking, think, "I'm chopping vegetables. Next, I will boil some water." It might feel funny at first, but it's a fantastic way to practice.
That's so true, Julia. Self-talk is one of my favorite techniques. And here's another tip. Narrate your day. As you go through your day, think about your activities in English. For example, "I'm going to the store. I need to buy some milk and bread." This helps you stay in English mode throughout the day.
Absolutely. And if you're not sure how to describe something, make it a learning opportunity. Use a dictionary or translator app to look up the words you need. Over time, you'll build a stronger vocabulary, and it will get easier.
Great advice, Julia. Another tip is to think in questions and answers. For example, if you're walking to work, ask yourself, "What do I see around me?" Then answer in English. "I see cars, trees, and people walking." It's like having a mini conversation with yourself.
That's a creative one, Jason. Another technique I love is setting small challenges for yourself. For example, pick a specific time of day, like breakfast or your commute, and commit to only thinking in English during that time. Gradually, you can increase the duration as you get more comfortable.
That's a great idea, Julia. And let's not forget about using technology. Apps like language learning tools or even the Notes app on your phone can help you practice. Write down your thoughts in English, or try voice-to-text features to see how well your sentences come out.
That's a powerful strategy, Jason. And here's another fun one. Dream in English. Okay, I know you can't force yourself to dream in a specific language, but before you go to sleep, think about something in English. Maybe plan your next day or imagine a conversation. Over time, you might start dreaming in English, too.
That's a great suggestion, Julia. Another practical tip is to surround yourself with English as much as possible. Listen to English podcasts, watch movies, or read books. The more input you get in English, the easier it will be to think in English.
Absolutely, Jason. And don't forget to be patient with yourself. Thinking in English is a habit, and like any habit, it takes time to develop. Start small, stay consistent, and celebrate your progress.
Exactly, Julia. The key is to keep practicing and not give up, even if it feels hard at first. Thinking in English is like exercising a muscle. The more you do it, the stronger it gets.
And we're here to cheer you on every step of the way. Up next, we'll do a quick role play to show you how to practice some of these tips in real life. Stay with us.
All right, let's move on to a quick role play to help you understand how to think in English. Julia, let's act out a simple example so our listeners can follow along and try it themselves.
Great idea, Jason. So, what's the scenario for today?
Let's imagine we're planning a day out. I'll start by asking you a question, and you'll respond in English while thinking about your plans. Then we'll switch roles, okay?
Perfect, let's do it.
Julia, what are your plans for tomorrow?
Tomorrow I'll wake up at 7 a.m. I'll make some coffee and have breakfast. After that, I plan to go to the gym for an hour. In the afternoon, I'll work on my project. And in the evening, I might watch a movie or read a book.
That sounds like a productive day. What kind of movie are you planning to watch?
I think I'll watch a comedy movie. I need something light and funny after a busy day.
Great choice! All right, now let's switch roles. You ask me about my plans.
Jason, what are your plans for the weekend?
This weekend, I'm planning to go hiking with some friends. We'll leave early in the morning, around 6 a.m., and head to the mountains. After the hike, we'll probably have lunch at a nearby cafe. In the evening, I'll relax at home and maybe catch up on some reading.
Wow, hiking sounds amazing. Do you hike often?
Not as often as I'd like to, but I try to go at least once a month. It's a great way to stay active and enjoy nature. All right, listeners, that's a simple role play you can practice. Think about your own day or plans and try to describe them in English. Even if you're just talking to yourself, this is a great way to start thinking in English.
Exactly. You can also mix it up by imagining conversations like asking yourself, "What will I do today?" or "What's my favorite food?" Then answer in English. The key is to make it a habit.
Practice this for just a few minutes a day, and you'll see a big improvement in how naturally you think and speak in English.
And don't forget to have fun with it. Coming up next, we'll wrap up with some final thoughts and takeaways from today's episode. Stay tuned.
Wow, Julia, today's episode was packed with tips and strategies. But before we wrap up, we want to hear from you, our listeners. Julia, why is listener engagement so important?
It's because learning English is a two-way street, Jason. Sharing your thoughts, questions, and experiences helps create a community where everyone can grow and learn together.
Exactly. So, here's your challenge for today. Think about one of the tips we shared, like self-talk or describing your day in English. Try it out and let us know how it went in the comments section.
Yes, and don't worry if it feels awkward at first. Remember, practice makes progress. You can also share any challenges you're facing when trying to think in English, and we'll do our best to help you in future episodes.
Absolutely. And if you enjoyed today's podcast, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's also learning English. Your support helps us create more content like this.
And if you want more practice, check out our other episodes or playlists for beginner English learners. There's plenty of material to keep you motivated and learning.
All right, listeners, thanks for joining us today. Remember, the journey to thinking in English starts with small, consistent steps. Keep practicing, stay patient, and most importantly, have fun.
Until next time, keep speaking, keep thinking, and keep learning. You've got this.
See you in the next episode, everyone!
We've all been there feeling like we need to get it right or say it perfectly. But the truth is, the more we try to control every word, the harder it becomes to speak naturally. So, in today's episode, we'll be sharing some useful tips and tricks to help you stop thinking too much and start talking like a pro.
Exactly. Today, we'll talk about why overthinking happens, how it affects our fluency, and most importantly, what we can do to start speaking English naturally without the constant mental editing. Whether you're a beginner or an intermediate learner, these strategies will help you get one step closer to thinking in English and speaking with confidence.
And we'll also share some simple, everyday activities that you can do to help train your brain to speak without hesitation. So stay with us until the end because you won't want to miss these tips. Let's jump right in.
All right, let's kick things off by talking about overthinking. So, what does it actually mean to overthink when speaking English? For many learners, it's that moment when you're about to say something and your mind starts racing. You wonder if your grammar is correct, if the pronunciation is right, or if you're using the correct word. Suddenly, What should be a simple conversation turns into a mental battle. Sound familiar?
Absolutely, Jason. I think a lot of learners experience this. They're so focused on getting everything perfect that they end up frozen, not knowing what to say or even how to say it. It's like the mind is filled with too many thoughts, and instead of speaking freely, you end up second-guessing every word before you say it.
Exactly. And this overthinking actually makes it harder to speak fluently. It leads to hesitation and can make conversations feel awkward. The goal is to speak more naturally, but overthinking holds us back from that flow. So, why does this happen in the first place?
Well, there are a couple of reasons. First, many learners are afraid of making mistakes. They worry about being judged, so they focus too much on speaking perfectly. Another reason is the fear of not being understood, so they'll spend extra time choosing the right words or thinking about how to pronounce them. It's completely normal, but it's also one of the biggest barriers to speaking without hesitation.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's that fear of judgment and perfectionism that often causes people to overthink. But the problem is, the more we try to avoid mistakes, the more we delay speaking, which ends up making us less fluent. It's like a cycle. The more we think about it, the more we struggle.
Right. And it's important to remember that everyone makes mistakes, even native speakers. The key is not to focus on being perfect, but rather on communicating your ideas clearly and confidently. After all, English is a tool for communication, not a test of your knowledge of every rule.
Exactly, Julia. And I think this is a big mindset shift that learners need to make. Instead of aiming for perfection, we should aim to be clear and natural in our conversations. This brings us to the next point. How can we stop overthinking and start speaking more freely?
Well, we're going to dive into that soon, but before we do, let's do a quick role play. I'll show you how overthinking can affect fluency. Watch how I freeze when I try to speak too carefully. Role play begins. Julia, overthinking. I want to say that, I think the weather is, very nice today, right? And role play.
See? She's trying so hard to get everything right that the sentence becomes clunky and unnatural. But when you let go of the overthinking, it sounds much better.
Exactly. Now let me show you how a natural conversation would go without overthinking. Role play begins again. Julia, natural. The weather's really nice today. End role play.
Much smoother, right? That's what we're aiming for. The key is to not overthink every little detail and just focus on getting your message across. We'll explore how to do that in the next segments. But first, let's talk about why it's so important to speak without overthinking. Now that we understand why overthinking is such a problem, let's dive into why it's so important to speak English naturally, without hesitation. For many learners, speaking freely might feel like a huge challenge, but when you let go of overthinking, you'll see huge improvements in both fluency and confidence. Julia, why do you think speaking naturally is so important for learners?
Great question, Jason. I think the most obvious reason is that it allows you to communicate more effectively. When you're constantly pausing to think about the next word or how to say something, it breaks the flow of the conversation. But when you speak naturally, the conversation feels more fluid and enjoyable for both you and the person you're speaking with. It's like you're not just trying to speak English, you're engaging in a real conversation.
Exactly. And the more you engage in these natural conversations, the more confident you'll become. For example, when you stop overthinking, you're able to listen better, which makes it easier to respond in the moment. When you're stuck in your head, it's hard to follow along with the conversation.
That's right. And I also think that speaking naturally helps you avoid the common trap of translating from your native language. This is something many learners struggle with. They're thinking in their first language and then translating each word into English. But that takes time and can make you sound less fluent. The goal is to start thinking directly in English, and speaking naturally helps with that.
You've hit the nail on the head, Julia. Translation slows everything down and makes you sound less confident. But when you speak naturally, you're less focused on the mechanics of the language and more focused on the message itself. You stop worrying about grammar rules and just focus on communicating clearly and effectively.
Exactly. And when you're more relaxed in a conversation, it's easier for the other person to understand you, too. Have you ever had a conversation where you could tell the other person was really focused on getting their English perfect? It often makes things a bit awkward, right?
Yes, when both people are trying to be perfect, it creates tension. But when you speak naturally, you create an environment where the conversation flows easily. You also build rapport with the person you're speaking to, which makes it much more enjoyable and less stressful.
And that's what we want, right? We want English to feel like a tool for communication, not a test of how well we know the rules. At the end of the day, people just want to understand what you're saying. The more you speak naturally, the more you'll feel like you belong in English-speaking environments.
I couldn't agree more. And on top of that, when you speak naturally, you also start to sound more like a native speaker. Native speakers don't pause to think about every word, they just talk. By practicing speaking naturally, you can get closer to that level of fluency.
Exactly. It's not about being perfect. It's about being able to express yourself in a way that feels authentic, and the more you practice, the more natural it will feel. Speaking naturally also helps you stay engaged and connected in conversations, which is what we all want.
Absolutely, Julia. So, now that we know why it's so important to speak naturally, let's move on and talk about the mental blockages that often stop learners from speaking freely. Because understanding those barriers is the first step in overcoming them. Now that we understand why speaking naturally is so important, let's explore the mental blockages that can stop us from speaking freely. We've all experienced those moments when we want to speak, but something inside holds us back. Julia, what do you think are the most common mental blockages that prevent learners from speaking confidently?
I think one of the biggest blockages is the fear of making mistakes. A lot of learners are so worried about speaking incorrectly that they freeze up when it's their turn to talk. They think, what if I say something wrong? Or what if I get laughed at? This fear can be paralyzing, and it's a huge barrier to fluency.
I agree with you, Julia. It's a major issue. Learners often get so caught up in being perfect that they forget that mistakes are part of the learning process. Even native speakers make mistakes. But when we let that fear control us, it stops us from practicing, and that's how we lose opportunities to improve.
Right. And another mental barrier that can prevent us from speaking freely is the fear of judgment. Many learners worry about how others will perceive them, whether it's their accent, their grammar, or their vocabulary. They're so focused on how they look to others that they forget to just focus on the conversation itself.
That's another great point. The fear of judgment makes us self-conscious, and that makes us hesitate. But in reality, most people are understanding and patient. They're not focused on your mistakes. They're focused on your message. And even if someone corrects you, it's a learning opportunity, not something to be afraid of.
Exactly. Another mental barrier I often see is perfectionism. Learners want to speak with perfect grammar, perfect pronunciation, and perfect vocabulary. While it's great to aim for improvement, trying to be perfect all the time actually holds us back. Language learning is about progress, not perfection.
That's so true. Perfectionism can lead to frustration because you'll always find something to improve. But if you let go of that need for perfection, you'll find yourself speaking more freely and making progress at a much faster rate.
And then there's the pressure of wanting to sound native. Many learners try so hard to sound like a native speaker that they ignore their own unique style of speaking. But the truth is, you don't need to sound like a native speaker to be effective in English. What's important is that you can express yourself clearly and confidently.
Absolutely. It's important to embrace your own voice. Native speakers don't expect you to speak exactly like them, they just want to understand you and engage in a meaningful conversation. So, these mental blockages, fear of mistakes, fear of judgment, perfectionism, and the pressure to sound native are things we need to let go of if we want to speak more naturally.
Right. And once we start recognizing these mental barriers, we can begin to challenge them. The key is to shift our mindset and focus on progress, not perfection. It's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to have an accent, and it's okay to not sound like a native speaker. What matters is that you're speaking and improving.
Exactly. And when we let go of these blockages, it becomes easier to speak freely and confidently. The next step is to develop strategies to overcome these mental barriers and speak more naturally. But before we get to that, let's take a quick moment to reflect on these blockages. Are any of these familiar to you? All right, now that we've understood the mental blockages that stop us from speaking freely, it's time to talk about how we can train our brains to speak more spontaneously and naturally. Julia, what's the first step in making this shift?
The first step is to stop overthinking every word. The more we focus on thinking before speaking, the harder it becomes to speak spontaneously. One way to start training your brain is by practicing speaking without any pressure to be perfect. Just get your thoughts out in English, even if they aren't perfectly structured.
That's so true. One great way to do this is through free talking exercises. For example, set a timer for 2 minutes and just talk about anything in English. Don't worry about making mistakes. Don't pause to think about grammar. Just talk. The goal is to build the habit of speaking without overthinking.
Exactly. And another powerful technique is shadowing. Shadowing is when you listen to a native speaker, whether it's a podcast, an interview, or a conversation, and then repeat what they say immediately after. The key here is to match their tone, speed, and rhythm. This exercise trains your brain to react quickly in English, helping you speak more spontaneously.
I love shadowing. It really helps with fluency. The key is to keep practicing and not worry about being perfect. The more you do it, the more your brain will get used to thinking and speaking in English at a natural pace.
Another technique to train your brain is chunking. This means grouping words together in natural phrases instead of trying to translate word by word. For example, instead of thinking, "I want to go to the store now," think of it as one chunk. "I want to go to the store now." This helps your brain process language faster and helps you sound more natural.
Great point, Julia. Chunking is a game changer. It reduces the time your brain spends thinking about individual words, which lets you speak more fluidly. A good practice for chunking is to listen to short clips of conversations, then try to repeat them in the same way, paying attention to how the words flow together.
And let's not forget about mental rehearsal. This is when you mentally practice conversations in your head before having them. For example, if you know you're going to meet someone and have a conversation in English, you can mentally run through the key phrases or topics you might talk about. This helps you feel more prepared and confident when the actual conversation happens.
Mental rehearsal is super useful, especially when you know you'll have to speak in a particular situation, like at work or while traveling. By visualizing the conversation beforehand, you can reduce anxiety and be more comfortable speaking spontaneously.
Right. And lastly, real-time conversations are essential for training your brain to speak spontaneously. This means actively participating in conversations with others, even if it's just small talk. It doesn't matter if you're speaking with a language partner or a friend. The more you practice in real-life situations, the